Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
You too. You too.
I'm Alyssa, by the way.
What's that?
I'm Alyssa, by the way, in case you didn't realize. I throw my name there,
I
but
see it right at the bottom of the screen.
yeah, I figured as much. But how are you doing this morning?
Doing well. Yeah, just worked for hour and a half and just I'm on leave now, so that works out okay. Let me sign out of my email here so I'm not distracted. Oops, let's see. Let me get this back. There we go. Okay, so I'm ready. How many people have already signed up, Alyssa?
Sorry, I switched my Wi-Fi. Actually, like 102 people signed up. But we do have people in the organization definitely tend to register twice sometimes.
Right. They forget that they've registered and they respond to every email by registering again.
Which, I mean, it's nice that they're devoted like that. But
right.
Yeah. So turnout tends
to... Oop, you froze there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You can hear me? Sorry, yeah. Can you see?
Yeah, I can see you. Your picture.
Where are you located?
Las Vegas.
Yeah. What can you see here? That's...
I'm seeing you in the room behind you.
Okay, that's fine. You can't see do you see my cat?
No, no cat. I see some dolls on a shelf, Russian, what are those dolls called?
Matryoshkas.
Matryoshkas. Okay.
This is actually my childhood room.
Oh, great.
Yeah, this is my childhood room, which is why it's I've got the dolls and whatnot. But here, I'm in New Jersey. My brother and his wife are also here with their 2-year-old and their newborn son.
Oh, wow.
So we are, I'm hoping, I tried to lock myself in a place where, hopefully we'll see.
Well, I do hearings from this room. I do everything from here now since the shutdown in March. And everyone's gone now. My wife is downstairs. She actually has a telemedicine checkup with her doctor. But last week I had my son and daughter-in-law who live in Morristown, New Jersey.
Oh, right. But I'm in Livingston.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you're right. And so they were here with their 5 children. And a couple times during hearings that I have on my office computer, there were loud noises in the hallway, kids running up and down the hallway, outside the door, banging into the door, that sort of thing. And I just, on the hearing, the court reporter said, I'm getting some interference there. And we had about 5 people on the call. And I said, who's ever making that noise, please try to stop. And then I muted my my microphone.
That's tricky.
So my best friend grew up in Livingston. He now lives in Pittsburgh. That's and fun. His mother's still there. So I've heard about Livingston for many, many years. I went to a wedding at West Caldwell, which is not too far.
Also not far.
Yeah.
It's
I grew up down the road in Philadelphia.
Ah, very nice. And you're in LA, San Francisco now?
Well, I work in Oakland, but my office is in Oakland, but I'm actually in Las Vegas.
Ah, so you're in Las Vegas now.
Right.
All right. I'm just making sure, trying to set up. I have my iPad in case somebody emails me about the program. Sometimes people will email and be like, I can't sign on, how it is. But people, I think, are getting used to this Zoom thing, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully. So you're in a house, which is the house is better for now. Like my brother and his wife were on the Upper East Side,
Mm-hmm.
and they had their baby in June 11th.
Oh,
So they came here for now because it's harder in a small apartment.
right. No, I have another son who is living in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley.
Oh,
He and his wife in a small apartment with their baby. And when we moved here, he started looking to move here as well. And then during Pesach, they actually came and moved in with us. My granddaughter was then about a year old. And so we had them because just a little more room to spread out. If you're going to be cooped up, a tiny apartment is difficult.
yeah.
So we
Yeah.
had them, but now they bought their own house a few blocks away. So we see them, but they're not here all the time.
That's good. That's the way. It's hard being in a house with your whole family. It's not natural.
So are you living in New York when you're not isolating?
Right now, no. I actually am in New Jersey for the time being. My boyfriend is in New York, so I spend like half the week there. But I used to live on the Upper West Side.
Okay.
I had some family stuff that I was, my father was taking care of him, and he passed. So it's I've been here for a bit, but yeah, that's I'm here in New Jersey now, and I actually got sworn into the bar in May.
Okay.
During the quarantine.
Yeah.
So I had the virtual swearing in ceremony.
Did you do New York and New Jersey or just one?
No, I just did New York, but now they have the UBE. So all I'd have to do for New Jersey would really be like apply to transfer my score, and I think there's like an hour-long test online. Yeah, so now New Jersey is on it. One of the few. I wish one day California would go on it, but I think California is the one place that is always going to insist on their own bar.
Right. Yeah, I've taken 3 bar exams. California was about 5 or 6 years ago, and it turns out I didn't need it after all. But I'm licensed in 3 states that have very little in the way of reciprocity. North Carolina has a lot of reciprocity, but only with states that also have reciprocity or comity. So it's a limited number, but also South Carolina and California. It's a lot to pay in bar dues, but now that you're getting older, the fees are reduced.
Are you so you're practicing now in Las Vegas?
No, I'm with Social Security Administration in Oakland.
Okay, got it. So
it's okay, but I'm teleworking from Las Vegas. When we had in-person hearings, I was commuting to Oakland for the hearing on days that I had hearings since December. I moved here in December from Northern.
Oh, okay. And how long is the commute?
Well, by car it's 9 hours. It's an hour and a half flight. It's pretty convenient to do. Just an hour and a half flight from because we have 3 airports in the Bay Area, and San Francisco and Oakland are pretty easy to get in and out of Oakland from.
So you've been on a plane recently?
No, not since March. Not since everything shut down. They sent us home one day. I had hearings in Oakland, and things were getting pretty weird. And they said, "Okay, no more in-person hearings. Everybody go home."
Yeah, I was helping with a trial in Westchester, and in March, and one of the first cases, I think the first cases in New York were in Westchester, and I got out immediately, and then the jury was there, and they were still deciding, but they were just like, we gotta get this done quickly because we gotta get out of here. So it wasn't great for the plaintiff, but it was the last trial there was. It was crazy. Oh my God. It was ages ago. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? I don't want to interrupt your
Doing
conversation.
well. This is Art. This is Michael Trayson. Is it okay if I call you Art?
Sure.
Okay. This is Michael Trayson. He is our executive vice president. He's based in Chicago.
Hey, Michael.
Hi, Art. How are you? What city are you in?
I'm in Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. So you still have many hours until the fast begins.
Right, right. I'm trying to stoke up on calories and especially water, being here in the desert.
Yeah, water is most important. I never have problem with food, but having a lot of water is essential.
What part of Chicago are you in, Michael?
Here, I'll show you where I am. Let me see if I can turn around my camera.
Oh, okay. You're right there.
Yeah, I'm in the Hancock, and I daven at the Anshe Shalom B'nai Israel in Lakeview, if you know the territory.
Of course. My daughter and son-in-law live there. Do you know the Shiatts, Daniel and Mindy Shiatt?
Shiatt.
He's a young man. He's actually on the board now of the shul.
Ah, okay. Well, my involvement with the shul is I daven there on Shabbos morning at the Hashkama Minyan.
Oh, okay.
And nowadays, now that we have it every week for the last few years, I don't even go upstairs.
Right, right.
And I'm also a member of my principal shul, where I'm an active member, is in Petah Tikva, where I also live.
Oh, okay.
But it's a little bit difficult to get to Israel these days.
Tough commute. Yeah. My daughter and son-in-law live on Kenmore, not far from Wrigley.
Ah, great. It's
And
like, especially during COVID-19, I wish we were not living where we are. And I would love to be in Lakeview now. I'm sure it's much safer than here.
yeah, it is pretty tough in downtown Chicago and the close-in
But
area.
Chicago Jewish community is really something special. I'm not from here. I'm from Detroit. I've been here around 20 years. And we have an amazing frum community.
Mm-hmm.
And then the general community is very actively engaged. We have 300,000, but Midwestern communities, they tend to be different than the huge Eastern communities. And
Right.
in the big cities, people can assimilate, they can take for granted. Here in Chicago, Detroit, etc., you have to work at being Jewish. You have to take it seriously.
Right. Well, it's a great congregation. It's a great congregation there.
I didn't mean to leave out New Jersey, Elisa.
I don't mind at all.
You're in, I can see by the background you're in New Jersey.
Yes, today I am this is my childhood room.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this is hopefully the most quiet because we have all the kids here. My brother's kids are here for the summer. Well, my brother too, with his wife, but
Oh.
2-year-olds have a lot of energy. Probably 2-year-old girls have a lot of energy.
I'm signing on a different tool here.
Okay.
Hi.
Hey, Stan. Hi, Stan. How are you?
Okay. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Art. This is another one of our board members, Stanley Fink, and he's our treasurer as well.
Hello, Stanley.
You don't have to be nice to me because I'm the treasurer.
Elisa, I wanted to ask you a question. I just noticed this morning I got an email indicating that Rhonda Lees is being added as a member of the nominating committee for the ILJ. Do you know anything about that? Nobody asked me or consulted with me. I just wondered how that happened.
I know nothing about it.
Okay, maybe, you know what? I didn't even know she was actively involved. She may have written to them and asked to be added. But I'm very glad to see it because I had complained that there was nobody from outside of about 3-block radius of where Mayor Lindzen lives who was on
Right.
that committee.
Right.
Yeah, well, Rhonda will be on, but not up on everybody's everybody's various affiliations. Everybody has so many.
It'd be a good idea for us to coordinate when it comes to IAJLJ and so on.
Yeah, we are working on some stuff, and actually, I know Steve spoke recently to Meyer, so there will be some stuff. I think actually he's supposed to be on our next board meeting in September.
You know, I'd like to say that if I have been remiss, I didn't mean to be, but I'm not in the loop on any of this. And since I'm the executive vice president, I feel like maybe I missed something.
No, there's nothing. No, it was just a conversation that Steve had with me about a week ago.
All right, you know, we don't need to go over this now on this call, but just feel free to ask or involve me on anything. I don't want you to think I'm dropping out.
No. Of course. Hi, Milan. How are you
doing?
Doing well. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for hosting us.
Of course, really excited. We should have quite a few people.
Yeah.
By the way, Elisa, we have something like 50 sponsors of our Auschwitz-Birkenau program that AAJLJ is a co-sponsor of. We're probably going to see 500 people on that Zoom visit to Birkenau.
Wow.
That's great. What's the date of that? I'm sorry, I didn't get
August 26th. We want to promote it because, and promote it early because we will have to probably turn people down. We can't take more than 500.
Ah, wow.
So we're going to do it kind of like we did the last one. It'll be a walking tour of Birkenau, and I will narrate it along with the executive president of the president of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation.
That's great. Yeah, and we'll have also hopefully some of our new Vegas chapter members will attend as well.
Yeah, great.
We're excited, Milan. A lot of you guys signed up. So
we have almost 28, 30.
From Vegas, you mean?
Yeah.
I didn't count the. Oh, you mean in membership generally? I mean today.
Yeah.
Oh, we have 13 on now.
I'm talking about this program. A lot of them signed up.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes. We have about 28 to 30 members.
Signed up. You have 28 to 30 registered.
No. We have about 100 registered.
I only see 13 participants right now.
Well, so come on. One would
No,
hope.
I thought I heard
Michael,
you say 28 to 30.
Yeah, but Michael, it's 11:58 and it's Jewish. It's not Jewish Standard Time yet.
No, I got confused when she said 28 to 30 people were on this.
No.
And I only.
Don't worry about it. We won't start till like 12:05, which is what we usually do. So we'll see. How are you doing, Milan?
Good. Yourself?
Doing pretty well. Oh, yeah, doing pretty well. Just making sure everything is set. Sometimes we have last minute registrations. Actually, Leslie Griffin signed up about like half an hour ago. So we will see. I know for anybody in Vegas, it's.
Have you seen Art? He's on the call. Have you?
Yeah, I've been talking to him.
Good morning, Milan.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just came to the office and I live like 40 minutes away. So they're good though.
I live at my office these days.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you're one of the.
Tough commute.
Yes, Milan, you're probably one of the first people going into an office, right?
Yeah.
How many people are there?
Well, we have in our department about 40 people and only half are coming in. We alternate weeks to 20 people. Yeah.
Okay, it's a good amount.
Yeah.
Good amount. All right. So yeah, we will get started in about 5 minutes. Unfortunately, Steve is not I'm actually going to be doing the full introduction and introducing you, Milan. Steve had a family obligation today, so he's not going to be able to make it, but I'll be introducing you and the new chapter, and you'll get to.
Oh, cool. Dylan Hositler is on. Hey, Dylan.
Morning. Morning, guys.
Hello.
Dylan is going to be speaking with the Lieutenant Governor on August 12th. And I'll be moderating that.
Yes. We have a lot done. That's a great, you've got your, that's the real background, right? Wow. I need one of those. Definitely one of
It's
those.
amazing how they can make virtual backgrounds tactile these days.
Yeah. Ah, man. Okay. Okay, let's see who else we have. And we also have Mark Spicer on the call. Mark Spicer is the regional vice president for New York, actually. So I don't know if he hears me yet, but I'm introducing him.
Oh, I see your cat, Alyssa.
Oh boy. All right.
Just a
Ben.
warning.
Let's see. I just came home from New York, so he missed me. So actually very quick ad. Ben, want to pick away? Cats don't listen that well. So, oh well. All right. We have, hi, Eliza.
Hello.
Hello. Eliza is our immediate past president. Art, I'm not sure if you know Eliza Lewin.
I certainly do by reputation, but not personally.
Sure.
And that's a good one, too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ken Stern is on. Hi, Ken.
Sorry?
And Kenneth Stern is on. We met in New York.
Ah, yes. Yes.
Hi.
Ken was our last, Ken was our previous, oh my God, man. All right, we are going to give it 2 more minutes and we will get started. That's okay with everyone.
Alyssa, I want to introduce you to Justice Kadish. She's on. So she sits on the Nevada Supreme Court and chairs our Nevada Managing Board.
Ah, hello. Hi,
Welcome.
just
Hi there.
very
Welcome.
nice to meet you. How
My
are you?
name's Alyssa too, but I spell it differently.
I know, and you have the curly hair.
Yes, yes. Can't get away from it.
Nope.
Welcome.
Hi, Bobby. Okay, let's see. And I believe that's all right. Hey, Bob, and all right, about to get started. If I'm about to get started, so if whoever has something going on in the background could just mute yourselves, that would be really great. Thanks so much. Okay. All right. Okay. Hello. Welcome to our program today. My name is Alyssa Gresh, and I am the Executive Director of the AHLJ. Thank you everybody so much for joining us. So today we are presenting the history and future of federal efforts to deal with the campus BDS movement. That will be featuring Judge Arthur C. Zeidman, who is on with us. We're very pleased to welcome him. So Judge Zeidman was the regional director of the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights in San Francisco, and he will be further introduced in a bit. So I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to join the AAJLJ today. I see a lot of our longtime members and supporters here, but I also see a lot of new members, so welcome to all of you. We have a number of people from across the country joining us. I know some of them are on the West Coast or in Las Vegas, so good morning to all of you and welcome. Unfortunately, Steve Greenwald, our president, is unable to join us today due to a family obligation, but we do have on our call most of our board and executive committee. We have Michael Trayson, our executive vice president, Rhonda Lees and Mark Spicer, our regional vice presidents, and at least one former president. I saw Lisa Lewin. So just to give everybody a bit of a background on the AAJLJ, if you're not familiar, the American Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists was founded in 1983, and we're affiliated with the International Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists, which is a mouthful. And this is a fellowship founded in 1969 by the late Justice Arthur J. Goldberg of the United States Supreme Court, late Justice Chaim Cohen of the Supreme Court of Israel, and René Cassin, French Nobel laureate and author of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The AAJLJ sponsors regular programs featuring speakers and discussions on matters of interest to lawyers nationally and worldwide. During the quarantine, we've especially been presenting many webinars. The AAJLJ programs address the relevance and applicability of Jewish law to current issues such as civil rights and human rights, social justice, and Israel and the rule of law, Holocaust issues and Jewish law. And we also work to combat those who attempt to use lawfare to stigmatize and delegitimize the state of Israel. Now, today I actually have some really exciting news to share. The AAJLJ has a new chapter, and it's in Las Vegas. So before we get to our program with Judge Zeidman, I'd like to introduce Mohan Chatterjee. He's the founding president of the AAJLJ's Nevada chapter, and he's been very enthusiastic, and he has a wonderful reputation in the Jewish community. And he's inspired Nevada's leading state Supreme Court justices, state district court judges, political leaders, and attorneys to join the new chapter of the AAJLJ, and we do have many of them on our call today. Just to give a brief introduction of Milan before he introduces our speaker today, Milan has received national acclaim for advancing civil rights in the Jewish community. As UCLA's graduate student body president, Milan advocated for a balanced public forum on the Israel-Palestine conflict, but he did receive a lot of opposition from extremist groups demanding the boycott of Jewish students. Along with standing up to the immense pressure from UCLA, Milan continues to be a national advocate for the Jewish community's civil rights. And even in 2016, the American Jewish Committee, AJC, gave Milan their inaugural Campus Courage Award. Currently, Milan serves as Associate Compliance Counsel at Las Vegas Sands Corp, where he's worked in the areas of anti-corruption, anti-money laundering, anti-human trafficking, and economic and trade sanctions, while also collaborating with federal agencies. He's worked at Glazer Weil in Los Angeles, Collazo Florentino and Kyle in New York City, and Reich Law in Las Vegas. So now I'm going to hand you over to Mohan Chatterjee, who will introduce the speaker. And just to note, after Judge Zeidman's presentation, I'm going to be moderating the Q&As. So please feel free to write your questions in the chat box so that we'll be able to address them. And thank you. Milan, please take over.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Alyssa, for your gracious introduction. As Alyssa indicated, I've been heavily involved in the Jewish community. I stood up to the anti-Israel BDS movement while I was a law student at UCLA, as serving as the graduate student body president. The situation got so bad that I actually finished my final year of school at NYU. And it was when I was at NYU Law School that I got introduced to Steve Greenwald, Alyssa, Rob Garson, and the AAGLJ. And it became a family for me when I lived in New York, attending the various seminars, meeting with them outside the seminars. So I really appreciate the friendship of the AAGLJ and national leadership. In Las Vegas, we have a very pro-Israel community, vibrant pro-Israel legal community. But unfortunately, we did not have a medium to unite people who shared that mission. So I'm really excited that we were able to form an AAGLJ chapter in Vegas. And while we did so, we were able to motivate or recruit Nevada's leading judges, including Supreme Court justices, district court judges for the state, political leaders, and leading attorneys and academicians. There are two people I want to acknowledge who are on this call. One is our chapter chairwoman, Justice Alyssa Kadish. She's a sitting Supreme Court justice on the Nevada Supreme Court. And then we have our chapter vice president, Scott Lackman, who's joining us. So I want to thank them for joining us here. And our chapter is growing rapidly. We're getting a lot of enthusiasm. And as we do so, we hope to work with the other chapters and national organization in advancing civil rights and legal rights in the Jewish community. It's today my great honor of introducing Judge Arthur C. Zeidman. Judge Zeidman sits on the managing board of AAGLJ Nevada, and I consider him to be a very good friend and mentor. Judge Zeidman has a legal career, 12 of which he served as regional director of the Department of Education Civil Rights Office in San Francisco. In that role, Judge Zeidman would investigate federal civil rights complaints in relating to race and national origin discrimination in the university system. As you know, the University of California system is a hotbed for the Bds movement and anti-Semitism. So Judge Zeidman received and investigated a lot of the complaints related to BDS in the University of California system. And while doing so, he's become a renowned expert on the BDS movement and the law related to it. I saw Alyssa Lewin is on the call. She's with the Brandeis Center. So Ken Marcus, who's now back with the Brandeis Center, he wrote a book, and he had a significant portion of it on Judge Zeidman and some of the obstacles he had to overcome when investigating BDS and anti-Semitism related complaints at the Civil Rights Office. Along with being with the Department of Education, Judge Zeidman has a 28-year career as an Army JAG Reserve officer, and he retired as a Lieutenant Colonel. So we really thank him for that support. He directed the North Carolina Division of Victim and Justice Services and also served in the Federal Defender's Office in North Carolina. Currently, Judge Zeidman is an administrative law judge with the Social Security Administration, and he lives in Las Vegas with his wife, Lynn. And Judge Zeidman graduated from Temple University and received his law degree from the prestigious Duke University School of Law. So it is my utmost honor to introduce Judge Zeidman, and look forward to hearing from him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Milan, and thank you, Alyssa. Just briefly before I get into it, I'm required to make one disclaimer, and that is that the views I express are my own, not necessarily the views of the Social Security Administration or the United States government. I'm very appreciative of the AAJLJ. I had heard about it for many years, but hadn't been involved. And fortunately, when I moved to Las Vegas 7 months ago, I became acquainted with Milan, and he got me active, and it's quite a distinguished project to have the chapter here in Nevada. As Milan said, we have very distinguished and experienced people who are interested and active. And as our President Greenwald told us a few weeks ago, he hopes that this will be this Nevada chapter will be a springboard to even greater activity of AAJLJ on the West Coast. So I'm certainly hopeful that that will happen soon, and especially given the rise of the Nevada chapter so quickly, it certainly can be replicated elsewhere. So if you know of people who are on the West Coast or specifically in Nevada who are interested in getting involved, please make sure you get that information to Alyssa, and we can spread the fine work and history of the AAJLJ. So let me go directly into what I'm going to speak about. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the BDS movement and then transition to how it has erupted on college campuses, and then go into the efforts of the federal government over the last really 25 years to deal with BDS on campus, the jurisdiction and some of the legal issues. And then I'll wrap up with a summary, and I'll be glad to take questions. Okay, I'm sure all of you know what BDS is, but very briefly, it is boycott, divestment, and sanctions. The model that was used originally came from rhetoric that was taken from the South African boycotts and sanctions under the reign of apartheid. And very early on, this was used by people who were anti-Israel, were against the state of Israel, the existence of Israel, to try to boycott companies that did business in the territories. This is how it started. There was a distinction between pre-67 Israel and the territories. And so there was an effort to boycott things that were products of the territories, or whether they're factories. And many in the Jewish community who were conflicted on the issue of territory thought, well, I'll support things that are made in Haifa, but maybe not made near Ramallah. It wasn't terribly successful, and many Israeli companies actually were able to relocate factories and business addresses, and so it didn't get too far. And so this evolved into a general BDS movement against Israel itself on the reasoning that there was an objection to the administration of the territories. In more recent years, this has been done through allegations of colonialization and other things. But here's the true background of BDS. First of all, up until recently, if you had an investment like a fund, especially a charitable fund, and you were a trustee, particularly a public trustee, you couldn't say we're not going to invest in company X because we don't like where it's located or what it does. You had a fiduciary duty to get the highest and best return for your money. Well, in recent years, many financial regulations have been amended to allow for so-called social justice investment. And so this is where the BDS movement has made its greatest inroads into getting charities to avoid investment in Israel. Now, what does this have to do with college campuses? Well, if you go back, Israel represents the birthplace of at least European-based Western civilization. And if you view Western civilization generally as something negative, you have to trace it back to Rome, and before Rome, Jerusalem. And so on college campuses where there's been a denigration of American greatness and the significance and blessings of liberty we enjoy, you can take this back to the origins of Israel. So the idea was to demonize the existence of Israel, and in particular, to make sure that on college campuses that students were getting negative images of Israel. They were no longer getting positive images and in particular, as Israel transitioned from its socialist origins, the idealized kibbutz, to become the startup nation, this compounded the issue. So over time, really in the early 90s, there began to be efforts to establish BDS on campus, as well as with university and college administrations. One of the problems is that if you're a student on a campus, particularly on a college campus, particularly a new student, and you don't have the background to understand what's going on, it's easy to become influenced. Your professors, college administrators, fellow students are constantly telling you about how awful Israel is, and that the universities should, one, boycott all things Israel, divest from investment in companies that are involved or have a connection to Israel. Also, and that's not just Israeli companies, it might be American companies that do business there. There was a big deal many years ago, I don't remember the outcome, where people would only drink Coke and not Pepsi because one had plants in Israel and one didn't. But it goes on from there. And then the sanctions issue is even more severe. It doesn't really materialize specifically, but so long as this was an academic exercise, it may have been distasteful, it may have been wrong-headed, but it didn't present a civil rights issue. What started to happen in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, was that campus activists who favored BDS were starting to demonstrate on campus. Now, we're all familiar with speakers who were shouted down on campus. Some of these were related to BDS, some of them were other movements. But what really became the hallmark of the BDS movement on campus was to attack students and professors who were viewed as either Jewish or pro-Israel. And this has continued to today with greater and lesser success. And so the US Department of Education is charged with policing this activity on campus. Why is that so? Well, you go back to the civil rights laws, and really a college campus or university doesn't have to do much. They can't discriminate on admissions in certain types of programming, but what obligation do they have to protect minorities? Well, if they're state institutions, such as University of Nevada, Las Vegas, or University of California, Los Angeles, they come under the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act. But what if they're private institutions? What if it's University of Southern California or Harvard or Yale, which are private and incidentally nominally religious? What's the jurisdiction there? Well, the civil rights laws do not apply to religious discrimination on campus because the educational institutions are drawn in to civil rights compliance based on their receipt of federal funds. Almost every college and university receives federal funds. Hillsdale and Grove City are notable exceptions on philosophical bases, but Notre Dame, Yeshiva University, and many private institutions receive federal funds, and they agree as part of their receiving federal funds that they won't discriminate on the basis of race, sex, national origin, disability. But what happens to religion? And so Congress, in enacting these grants and putting the requirements that these schools adhere to non-discriminatory policies, specifically excluded religion. And the idea was that if Notre Dame wanted to hire Catholic priests to be instructors and to advocate the dogma on campus, or if Toro wanted to identify as a Jewish university, it wouldn't be accused of discrimination based on religion. So here we are in the late 90s, the BDS movement is picking up steam, And what are they doing? They're going to campuses and they're harassing students as part of their efforts. And some of it is organic. There are student organizations, some of which in the past were funded by Saudi Arabia charities and other out-of-country charities, and others by American-based charities, which were either unaware or unconcerned about actual anti-Israel bias. You have Centers for Middle Eastern Studies. So you actually have funding on campus. And then you have campus groups that receive student activity funding. So there's been a barrage on many campuses of activity. The most stark effort in my memory was at UC Berkeley, where activists in the BDS movement set up tables on campus near a park where there are crossing sidewalks, and it's common for students to cross through this small park to get to classrooms. And here on UC Berkeley, this was about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, they were dressed in military uniforms with IDF insignia, and they carried fake rifles. Now imagine a college campus where it's okay to carry fake rifles. And what they would do is, if they saw someone who looked Jewish, they would actually point the rifle, and I think they may have had plastic bayonets on it. They'd point it at them and say, "You can't go down this sidewalk because you're a Jew or you're an Israeli." The language would vary, and they'd say, "This is how the Palestinians are treated, and this is why we have boycott, divestment, and sanctions." And they would actually make these students walk a very circuitous route, blocks out of their way, just to get across a plaza to classrooms. That was perhaps I think, the most egregious thing. But in any event, in the 1990s, the Clinton administration attempted to deal with this issue early on. And to be fair to the Clinton administration and those that followed, there was this issue. Was the BDS movement and campus anti-Semitism in general, was it merely religious discrimination? I say merely because, as I've said, it's carved out of the civil rights laws. Was it religious discrimination? And during the Clinton administration, the people who ran the Office for Civil Rights in the Department of Education decided that it was indeed religious discrimination, and other than efforts to mediate some disputes, they were not going to investigate. This seemed to make some sense. After all, you could argue the Jews are members of a religion, and therefore Congress didn't want OCR to get involved with this. On the other hand, it really had nothing to do with religion. That was really a false analogy, because these students, some of them who were not Jewish, were being accosted on campus, and a hostile environment was being created because they looked Jewish. Others, because they wore religious insignia, like a yarmulke. But clearly, this was not some kind of doctrinal discussion on religion or an issue regarding religious practice. It was clear that it was because of a Jewish student's national origin. Now, for those who deny the right of existence of the State of Israel, they would say, well, we don't know that Jews really came from Israel. But the Clinton administration took the position that it was not national origin, which would have been illegal, and stayed out of the debate. All right, that was where they were. When the George W. Bush administration came in 2001, this issue was revisited, and Bush brought in Ken Marcus, that Mohan mentioned earlier, who had actually been a civil rights lawyer primarily in the area of housing, discrimination in housing. And he came in and said, this doesn't make sense. And the policy was reversed. He issued several policy letters in 2002 and 2003 that were significant because they established that the policy was to recognize that the BDS movement and campus anti-Semitism were attacks on Jews and others as a member of, as a function of national origin, which is really akin to race rather than some theological issue or debate. And in fact, Ken's memos also extended this to Arab and Muslim citizens, to Sikhs, and other national origins that had been viewed strictly through a religious lens. Well, that was really good. It did not adopt what's come to be known as the State Department definition of anti-Semitism, but it was pretty close. And at that time, I was working, I started work as a regional director of the San Francisco office. Our jurisdiction was schools in California. And there were notorious cases. There was a case, complaint filed at UC Irvine, where there was repeated anti-Semitism on campus on a regular basis. There was a student fair every fall where the BDS movement would set up tables and harass students, and they would have demonstrations, and they would push over the pro-Israel signs and the Hillel table, and it continued. So that we had UC Irvine, and there were other complaints filed at other schools. So we took Ken Marcus's policy letters seriously and went ahead and investigated, just as we would investigate if there was a noose found on campus and someone complained about that, if there were anti-Black or anti-women activities going on, complaints about failures to accommodate disabilities. And so we just went with it. Well, unbeknownst to me, well, let me back up for a second. So Ken Marcus left to found the Brandeis Center, which deals with anti-Semitism in many aspects. Oh, no, excuse me. He went to serve on the Civil Rights Commission first. And so he moved out, and his role was taken up by other political appointees in the Bush administration. What was unbeknownst to me was that they were hostile to Ken's clear interpretation of the law and regulations. And so as my office worked to investigate campus anti-Semitism in general, and BDS hostility on campus in particular, it wasn't apparent to me until some time that the political appointees and the senior career people in the agency in Washington were actually working to undermine that. As Mohan mentioned, there's an entire chapter in Ken Marcus's seminal publication. I think it's called Civil Rights in America. You can find it on Amazon or other publications, and there's a whole chapter dedicated to what went on at OCR, including specifically with me. There was an effort to make me leave. This was 2005, 2006. When I didn't see the handwriting on the wall that the policy had been secretly changed, so the people in the administration went after me. And I survived, they left, and I continued doing it for a total of 12 years, this work. But in any event, so we had a dichotomy. The official efforts of the Bush administration were to combat campus anti-Semitism. The BDS movement was clearly part of that. Discussions on campus about disinvestment from Israel became often hostile. There were students who would speak up at university board meetings and student government meetings in opposition to disinvestment, and they would be what's now called doxxed. Their personal information would be sent out. And so they were clearly being harassed, sometimes physically. And yet the administration seemed to be parking these investigations and not letting them go anywhere. Let me just make a side comment. I saw something I might forget later, the idea that Title VI, which is the funding mechanism, might be amended to include religious discrimination. I'm going to tell you in a minute why that's not necessary. and why that might be discouraged, because it would probably require a lot of universities to become secular or to avoid their own religious missions. But in any event, let me get back to my story. This continued until the folks in the Bush administration left. Well, the Obama administration came in, and many people in the Jewish community and activists thought that, based on their own notions of what would happen, is that this blind eye to the problems on campus would be ignored. To the contrary, the administration brought in an amazing woman, Ruslan Ali, who was the assistant secretary. I rarely agreed with her on anything. We were poles apart on so many things, but she looked at the policy that Ken Marcus had put in place, and she actually strengthened it. And this had the support of the administration. So in the early part of the Obama administration, these investigations were being reopened. The way these investigations conclude technically is, if I were to find a violation, it would go through an administrative process for the university to lose federal funding. That almost never happens. It hasn't even been attempted since about 1991 for any school in the country. Typically, we would go in and negotiate. We'd say, okay, you have to put in place some protection for the victimized students or change policies and procedures. And the negotiations in most cases were successful. So specifically, the Obama administration started authorizing me and all the other regional directors around the country to start to resume investigating aggressively the anti-Semitism on campus as national origin discrimination. They adopted what has been known, for those of you who get into the details of this, as the State Department definition of anti-Semitism in practice, if not officially, which is basically the use of long-held European canards about Jews and stereotypes as a part of demonizing Israel is actually anti-Semitism. It's not just a policy disagreement with Israel. In any event, we started in more aggressively investigating these complaints and, more importantly, perhaps negotiating settlement agreements. Now, they're very tough because you do have First Amendment rights of the people who want to express their hostility to Israel or to any policies involving Israel. You have to have an aggressive debate. It may not be friendly. You know, college campuses, we think there are a lot of snowflakes, but they should be able to engage in debate. And so those rights were protected. But at the same time, some of the overt actions that were clearly hostile, such as threatening students with weapons, whether fake or not, throwing stones, disrupting meetings, there was genuine improvement in the college campuses that we investigated. The problem certainly did not go away at all, but it really stopped growing for a while, where the OCR was able to rush in like firemen and put out a blaze. That was a great thing, but the wildfire still raged across many campuses, because without an affirmative complaint, we couldn't just go in nationwide and simply investigate every school. But in any event, it was very significant progress. When Ali left and was replaced by Catherine Lehman, she continued during the second term Obama had to allow these complaints to be investigated and dealt with. Okay, now let's move to 2017. There's a new administration. People are being told, at that point, I had already left OCR to take my current job, but I've been in touch with people continuing to work there. And there was great consternation across the country in many quarters that the new administration, the Trump administration, really didn't care about this stuff and might revert to the noblesse oblige of the Bush administration, which basically put it at the second term after Ken Marcus left, it decided to put this off its radar. So there were predictions about that. Plus, the Jewish community, particularly those who are not particularly enamored with Israel itself, was not comfortable with some of the actions that had taken place even during the Obama administration to curtail anti-Semitism and BDS in particular on campus. Well, interestingly enough, it took Ken Marcus almost 2 years to get confirmed. His name was put up, was not put up immediately, but when it was put up, the confirmation, the senators were able to delay his nomination. Nevertheless, the people who came in, the acting political appointees, clearly steered this in the same direction it had been going under Obama. And then finally, when Ken Marcus came in, he stepped up more aggressively to, he came back as assistant secretary, running the Office for Civil Rights. And it came back to an aggressive posture. And to this day now, I am hearing reports from my former colleagues and some of my employees that the BDS movement, when complaints are received, is a high priority issue in this administration. And I'm hoping that will be continuing after Ken Marcus, now that Ken Marcus has left. Some of the career bureaucrats during the last Bush administration who had piled on to oppose President Bush's own policies against anti-Semitism have left. The worst of those, I won't name names, but the worst of them was actually forced to retire on threat of being transferred into some distant and unimportant position somewhere. And so she retired, and she had really been aggressive against the policy while I was even on the books. So what does the future hold for dealing with anti-Semitism on campus? Well, first of all, everything still relies on people filing complaints. Now, we're a legal organization. A complainant does not have to have standing. You can be a professor on campus. You can be an alumnus. You can be a bystander. You can live near the college and read in the paper that there's the BDS movement is actively and aggressively harassing students or forcing the university administration to make policy decisions which are hostile to Jewish students on campus. There is no standing requirement. In fact, one of the most successful parties to raise anti-Semitism complaints on campus over the years was the ZOA, the Zionist Organization of America. Mort Klein and specifically Susan Tuckman, the general counsel, very aggressive and following through and assisting investigations, getting statements. They did it many times when no one else would do it, either because the college Hillel chapter was a little timid about rocking the boat. And I understand their position. I was active in Hillel as a student, or others. But if you, as someone who has learned about a problem on a specific campus, want to file a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights, it can be done. Okay, a question about the First Amendment. I'm going to take that question. And so the question was about the intersection of civil rights and the First Amendment. Well, first thing is, OCR does not enforce the First Amendment. And this is a common misconception. Someone wants to speak on campus, whether it's a speaker or a student who wants to speak. The fact that they're not allowed to speak or are somehow harassed for what they say is actually not an OCR jurisdictional issue. There's no jurisdiction to enforce the First Amendment. It's in this regard, it's simply Title VI. However, in investigating cases, the OCR has to be aware that both the university cannot impede First Amendment rights in the pursuit of civil rights. So in a different context, if somebody posts a flyer that is anti-Black, anti-gay, and it's not offensive per se, it's just disturbing, OCR would not necessarily find a violation for that. Or if someone has an op-ed that criticizes Israel, even pretty intensely, there is First Amendment protection, even if that tends to make people unhappy or insecure as students. It's just when the matter when it transfers into conduct, physical confrontation, which is very common, disruptive behavior such as drowning out a speaker. And by the way, UC Irvine, which was the old seminal case, as I said, that was incidentally brought by ZOA. But UC Irvine changed under the Obama administration to the point that when there was a disruption of a speaker, the university actually suspended the disruptors for their conduct, not for what they were saying. So that's how First Amendment is dealt with. It's a sensitive balance, but most of these cases go so far beyond the issue of speech by the time they get to OCR that it's not really that difficult. When a student gets punched in the face, as happened at some campuses, there's not much First Amendment defense to that. All right, so what does the future hold? Well, it really depends on what the administration or the next administration decides to do. I am encouraged by the fact that the Obama administration did take a more aggressive posture, and that the Trump administration really has been excellent and has built on what the Obama administration started, and has the most sensitive posture to anti-Jewish, anti-Israeli, pro-BDS hostility on campus. I have no reason to believe that the current administration wouldn't continue that. I'm certain that Ken Marcus would not have left if he thought that there was a chance that this time, like last time, it would slip back into the chaos that we saw in the 2004 to 2009 period. I don't know what would happen with a Biden administration. I really have no knowledge, and so I'm not expressing an opinion one way or the other. I think that it's a reasonable question to ask those of you who want to pursue this, is to find out if there are any statements or policies. Probably not. It's not something that presidential campaigns are built on. But I see it as a very positive thing that the current administration has set in place a process. The president signed an executive order, which goes well beyond a Department of Education regulation, recognizing the evils of anti-Semitism and how it can be expressed in various ways, such as boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And I would assume that executive order will continue until and unless it's revoked by some later administration. We have just a few minutes left. It's getting towards the end of the hour. I do want to be able to take questions. I'm going to turn the remarks back over to Alyssa, and thank you very much. I appreciate your interest today. Let me go back to my original message. The AAJLJ is a tremendous vehicle for getting information and advocacy out there, and I would urge all of you to get your colleagues involved, and especially our Nevada chapter. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if it's all right, I just want to make sure nobody has any other questions or comments, just to give them a final chance. So if anyone has anything that they want to ask. Judge Zeidman, while he's still here, please.
Alyssa, I just saw a comment pop up, and I haven't been paying attention to all of them, but it caught my attention. It says the Democratic platform opposes BDS. I haven't looked into it. I am sure that that is true. The BDS issue has come up in local county party resolutions. When I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is in Wake County, many years ago, I'd say about 20 years ago, there was a BDS resolution that actually got adopted as part of the county Democratic platform. And then I was active then through APAC with the local Democratic activists who were able to take it out. But I don't think it's an issue on the national political platform for the Democratic Party. It pops up in county organizations primarily.
Okay. And I think you fully addressed the questions. You kind of took my job and fully addressed the questions in the chat. I believe, I'm not sure if you addressed Baruch Weiss's question about the letters on the University of California cases.
I'm not sure I did. If you could repeat the question, I'm not sure I saw it.
Okay, it's right here. It's I have seen 3 letters cited by Palestine Legal dating to 2013 dismissing 3 different University of California cases involving anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism. Are there other instances where OCR came to the opposite conclusion and found that such cases found to have merit? Is there any way to obtain such letters?
Sure. So since about 2013 or 14, OCR has published its letters on its U.S. Department of Education website. We started publishing them back then. In fact, there was a massive effort to scan in the decisional letters. I would caution reading too much into a dismissal letter, which obviously the Palestinian advocates wanted people to do. Cases were often dismissed because they were resolved. There was no longer a violation. You don't get punished for violating civil rights as a university official. You agree to make changes. And so many times that comes with a dismissal of the complaint. In the Bush administration, the complaints were dismissed frivolously when they were trying to undermine the policy. So for example, let me give you a specific example. UC Santa Cruz, Tammy Rossman Benjamin is down there and has been a heroic fighter for many years. She brought a complaint, and after Ken Marcus left, the folks in Washington said to dismiss the complaint because she didn't allege that any students of Israeli origin were affected. And I said, well, you know, I'm a Jew, I'm of Israeli origin, even though at that time I'd never set foot in Israel personally. I have since then. And ironically, there was one student who was Israeli and was there as a foreign student. So they weren't able to dismiss the case. But they used to look for things like that, technicalities to dismiss a case. It never means there's no violation. It means usually that the case has been resolved or there was some issue like it wasn't brought within 180 days of the offensive action.
Okay, and so we actually have had a number of new questions pop up. I don't know if you would, if your hard stop time is 1 o'clock or if you'd be able to stay a few minutes.
No, I can stay later. I put in for leave for an hour beyond this. So
okay, great. And for anyone who is able to stay on, please do so. Otherwise, I'll be sending a recording of this around after. Okay, so first, Richard Fulton, he had asked a question about, let's see, about Title VI earlier. And I don't know if you fully addressed it or if you just kind of referred to it.
Okay. What was the question? I'm not seeing them on the screen. So
Right. Oh, okay. Some have suggested that Title VI be amended to add religion as a protected category so as to permanently enshrine the Bush-Obama Marcus interpretation. I believe that this would create huge problems for religiously affiliated schools and not address the more nuanced issue of how anti-Semitism relates to anti-Israelism. Do you agree?
I agree, because one of the problems of receiving federal funds is that you have to comply with the agreements. And we have a vast history of religious institutions in this country that run colleges. Some are unexpected. You know, I attended Temple University. Many people think that was some kind of Jewish institution. It was started as the Baptist Temple College. The Chapel of the Four Chaplains, memorializing the 4 different faith chaplains who went down with their ship in World War II, is actually a non-denominational chapel, but it is Christian operated. The school later became affiliated with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so it's some kind of a hybrid. It would be required to remove religious markings and things like that. The other problem is that by redefining the issue as religious discrimination, it actually undermines the efforts that were started to protect students from anti-Semitism on campus. What if you have someone who's not Jewish? Let's say he's a student at UCLA and runs a student government organization and decides he wants to be even-handed in presentation of issues involving Israel. And the university harasses him, BDS operatives harass him. Well, if he's not Jewish, there might not be any jurisdiction. It's really a national origin issue that's expressed by hostility to people who are involved in a particular part of the country. And under civil rights law, you don't have to be a member of the affected race specifically. We have, I think it was Loving versus Virginia, the US Supreme Court case about an interracial marriage that, even if you're not specifically a member, if you are identified as such or harassed because of that type of involvement, there is jurisdiction. So I would say probably to avoid that. The other thing is you have many religious seminaries that are college accredited, and they would risk losing funding if they taught their doctrines or tried to influence students.
Okay. So we do have a number of questions that have popped up. And I also do want to just make one quick reference. We do have our previous POJ, Pursuit of Justice Awards nominees on as well, Baruch Weiss and Aliza Lewin. So just want to acknowledge them before I go on to the next question. So Jonathan Kutab, who we've had to speak for us before, asks, are you assuming that BDS is anti-Semitic or that opposition to Israel and its policies is necessarily anti-Semitic?
Okay, let's start with the second question first because it sort of subsumes the first. Is opposition to Israel necessarily anti-Semitic? No. You know, if you live in Israel, certainly not only are you free to criticize Israel, you can criticize the government. You know that old joke about Khrushchev and Kennedy, and Kennedy says, you know, in America we have freedom. If anybody wants to criticize the president of the United States, they can do it. And Khrushchev says we have the same freedom. Everybody in Russia can criticize the president of the United States. Okay, so no, so expressing views that are deemed to be anti-Israel are not per se harassment, or not per se illegal violation of Title VI. And it just depends more on the nature of expressing that. If it is, if there's a debate, a discussion, even if it gets heated, Again, college campuses are supposed to be a place of real vigorous debate and strongly held positions. It's where the expression of the views is done in a way that it becomes specifically hostile to a group of students on campus. So if you are advocating that the university have nothing to do with Israel, and let me just give a specific example, and to the extent that they want to boycott, let's talk about the boycott issue. A student government proposal comes up and says, Teva and Gilead have introduced vaccines against COVID, and we want the university health system not to use them. And students on campus say, wait a minute, we're supposed to get our vaccinations through the university health system. Without Teva and Gilead, there are only 3 on campus and 10,000 students. That creates a hostile environment for me. Maybe I won't go there. So in that case, something which might seem as an innocuous BDS policy might actually turn out to be hostile to Jewish students. It might be hostile to all students. But the issue there is not whether BDS per se is a violation. It typically is the conduct behind it and how it's expressed. So, and conduct can be related to speech. So if the pro-BDS demonstrators are demanding that the university condemn BDS and not allow students from Israel, which they define as anyone who's ever been to Israel, then you clearly have something which states a prima facie case of hostile environment discrimination.
Okay, thank you. So we have had a number of questions come in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you address, if it's okay, like 3 more questions, sure. And then for the other questions, I'll send them to you, and if you would be able to respond, and I'll give you the email addresses.
Okay, and I'll try to be more brief. I'm sort of...
No, that's not your fault. A lot of this tends to happen. People have a moment to, ruminate, and then they start to think of a lot of questions. So we have Joe Cohn. He asked, do you make a distinction between individuals' right to call for a boycott and an institution's legal obligation to not impose a boycott that would have academic freedom implications?
Okay, I think I understand the question. Calling for a boycott, advocating a position is never a civil rights violation per se. And an academician who would call for a boycott, advocate, write a piece, maybe even talk about it in class, is going to be protected. And so, no, those would not, they might trigger a civil rights complaint by someone who disagrees, but it would not be seen as a violation, simply the advocacy. But in these areas, advocacies often turn into demonstrations. So, and when I say demonstrations, I'm not just talking about picketing, but I mean physical displays. If a teacher says to the students, we're going to boycott Israel, those of you who have SodaStream in your backpacks, I'm confiscating them and throwing them out. That would clearly be something that goes beyond speech and advocacy and could give rise to a hostile environment. So it's really the actions that are taken, although the speech itself could be on the border.
Okay, thank you. And then we have Bob Herbst. He says, I wrote a college newspaper editorial in 1968 or 1969 calling for the private university to divest from South Africa. It didn't happen for at least a decade later, but no one accused me of unlawful conduct. Why is non-violent advocacy of BDS considered unlawful by OCR when it is employed against Israeli state policy or for Palestinian rights advocacy?
Well, yeah, as an op-ed piece or an advocacy piece would not be a violation of Title VI. And there's certainly no shortage of it. It's in all the academic publications that are going on. And so if someone wrote a piece today similar to Bob's piece from those years ago, from 50 years ago, it wouldn't cause a problem per se. It might get people very upset. There really was no significant South African American population. It's there, but the numbers are very small. So even if you had massive demonstrations on campus, it's unlikely that you'd find enough people to object to it. In fact, many South African emigres objected to apartheid, and many left for that reason. So if there's no hostile environment on campus, even if it devolved into violence, there probably wouldn't be an OCR issue. Jewish students are present on campuses, and so the issue is not the advocacy, it's really the action that's taken to prevent. If you think about it this way, being part of the Department of Education, things that go on in schools that prevent students from obtaining an education, a full education, as a result of their race, national origin, sex, or disability, are what creates the discrimination, or what is evidence of it. So an op-ed piece, even if it's disturbing, doesn't prevent the student from obtaining an education. A demonstration where a student is physically assaulted, or where the university takes some specific action hostile to the student, is something else.
Okay, I'm gonna go to one more question. I know, I understand that one of our, Jonathan Kutab, doesn't necessarily feel that his question has been completely addressed. I do want to address a couple of more questions, and then as I said, I'll send you the rest of the questions, if that's all right. Okay. So our next question is there any truth to BLM supporting BDS?
Well, I don't have any special knowledge of that, one way or the other. Everything I know is from what I read in newspapers and see in the media. I have seen some references to that. I don't know whether it's pervasive. And so I would say, from my knowledge, there's no specific connection, but I haven't really looked into it deeply.
Okay. And I think we are going to end with a question from Ken Stern. What definitions does OCR use regarding anti-Black, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinians, and other such cases?
Okay, let's start with anti-Black. That's pretty easy. In Title VI, that falls under race. Interestingly enough, the issue really doesn't come up in terms of definition, because the people who complain typically are Black, although many times there are white parents or professors or others who, as I said, there's no standing requirement, but it's rarely unclear when students are being harassed because of their race. Some of the more difficult issues, not having to do with Black students, have to do with Asian students. Are they Asian Americans, South Asian? Are there other definitions? People of mixed race? And so OCR has to go in, but the standard is pretty low. If you've alleged that there's harassment of Black students on campus, we really don't need to know whether you in fact are Black. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't, it really doesn't matter. On the issue of Palestinians, Muslims, and Arabs. So Arab is a racial definition. And it simply means people who are of Arab origin. That's an easy one because it's a national origin distinction. And if students are being harassed because they're Arab, then that is pretty easy to discern. After 9/11, there were incidents reported to OCR that students of various national origins were being harassed because they were perceived as being Arabs. I'm putting aside Muslim for a moment, and I'll get to it. And perhaps most troubling, although it didn't make it any less egregious, was people like Sikhs and Indians and other national origins who were not Arab, Turkmen, who were being harassed because they were perceived to be Arabs. Well, civil rights law, Title VI law is pretty clear that you don't have to actually, it's not only an issue of standing, but if Arab students are being harassed, and that includes non-Arab students simply because the harassers are not that sophisticated or they don't care, well, you still have illegal discrimination. That was an easy one. What do you do with Muslims? So Ken Marcus, in his first letters, talked about Jews, Muslims, Arabs, and Sikhs, because they seem to be the most difficult thing. The Muslim question is very difficult. Islam is a very large religion, difficult to identify ethnically. We think of Arabs as Muslims, but there are significant populations of Christians and other denominations of people who are ethnically Arab. And so typically OCR paints with a broad brush on that. If people are being discriminated against because they're Muslim, and it is a national origin issue, so if students are being harassed and called terrorists, this doesn't happen as much on college campuses, but sometimes in high schools, and they happen to be Muslim, so that's dealt with as a Title VI violation, because even though the harasser is saying Muslim, they're really referring to Arabs. The specific case where this came up was in St. Paul, Minnesota, where there's a large Somali American population. They are overwhelmingly Muslim. They're not Arab, and they're not, but they are Black. And there was harassment based on their being called Arabs. Well, it was interpreted as a more generalized national origin issue and resolved by it was a school district, not a college, but the school district resolved to make efforts to stop that discrimination. Now, the issue of Palestinians is a difficult one. Who is a Palestinian? Before the founding of Israel, it was mostly considered to be Jews. I'm not going to get into that whole discussion, but those who today call themselves Palestinians are Arabs, and as a national origin issue, they would be fully protected, and they are fully protected under Title VI.
Thank you so much. So I know we do actually have a number of questions and comments that have come up, and we're really grateful, and I'm sure you agree, to have, you know, a really widely represented viewpoints on all spectrums. And thank you to everyone for participating and really bringing up some of the hard questions that's really important for a group of attorneys and jurists. So thank you. And I hope that we can continue this conversation in the future. And thank you so much, Judge Zeidman and Milan, for organizing the Vegas chapter, and to everyone who joined us. And please, we would love for you to join the AJLJ. We're going to be launching a new website next month with a lot of new features, so it's going to be much more user-friendly. So we look forward to seeing you much more in the future. And everybody, take care, stay safe.
Thanks, Alyssa. Bye, everybody.
Right. Bye-bye.
I believe you want to proceed.
I think I saw a phone number that